We're going to move, we're going to transition into, that time of being a teen. I guess maybe some of you are young enough to remember what that felt like. You know, some of those emotions that were bubbling around inside you. And now maybe some of you have got teens and you remember what it feels like because you're always being reminded every day. So this little video, I think, is actually an advert for a UK phone company, but I thought they did a really good job of kind of summing up just some of the joys and some of the challenges of being a teenager. So let's just watch this together first.
1 through 12 and 1 through 6. I want that during on Tuesday. What days are during?
You should have seen this outfit. What is that? So embarrassing. I'll sell it.
Growing up with phones isn't easy. EE Learn has new tools to help for every kid on any network. This is New EE.
So partly wanted you to know about that because that's just like you can still Google that and there's some tools that you might find helpful. But I tell you, it brings a tear to my eye most times I watch that, and I've seen it a few times because it stirs something, you know, the emotions within me of just like, yeah. Like when you see that girl just walking away crying with like the bullies filming her, you know? And the thing is, we all got bullied as teenagers, but it gets amplified because of the digital stuff, isn't it? It's not, some of this stuff, some of the good stuff and some of the hard stuff hasn't changed. You still fancy people that don't fancy you. You still end up getting bullied. You still have people who seem to look amazing and you think you look awful. That's all just kind of being a teenager stuff. But then it's like just, oh yeah, now I'm not just looking at the kids in my class who all seem really good looking and I'm not. I'm now looking at all the people on the internet who all seem really good looking and I'm not. You know, so it's that, isn't it? And so, yeah, anyway, it stirs my heart, and I think it's not easy. It's not easy for our teens. It's not easy for our kids, but I do think there are ways forward. And one of the things, I guess, as going back to this journey of both independence, them in real life being independent, but also digital independence, I guess. In this first stage, perhaps when they first get a phone, for example, and we'll have a bit of a conversation around that in a minute, you know, it's about, okay, how do we do controls and conversations? How do we keep those things happening, both things happening? Because ultimately, as I said, we're probably going to find ourselves once they're like 16 and 17, and then obviously adults, we don't have control anymore. But hopefully the conversation continues and we keep talking about that stuff. So let me ask you this question for you to vote on. As a carer or a parent, how easy do you find it to when we're thinking about teenagers, set rules and controls and boundaries and have chats and conversations. I think but me and my wife, we probably lean slightly differently on this one. So I probably find it a little easier to kind of have the chats and the conversations. My wife finds it a bit easier to say, no, we said it was this and this is what it's going to be, you know, and she just finds that a little easier to do. Okay, but where do you fit on that? So I'll give you a moment to vote whilst I have a slurp of tea. Okay, interesting. So maybe some of you saying, the rule setting bit, that feels like it's an extension of what we were doing anyway when they were little. So okay, we just keep doing that. Kind of having the conversation, maybe that's a little bit harder, and that seems to be you're fairly in the middle. But if as we can see, you were going to pick one you find slightly easier as a group, it would seem that the rules and controls are a bit easier. Let me just remind you of these stats then that we talked about. Just want to put them in front of you to remind us of kind of why we're having this conversation, why we're kind of talking about this kind of thing. And it has to be said that a lot of this for teenagers happens because they get a phone. And I'm not necessarily down on teenagers having a phone. I remember, you know, the conversations we had with our girls about them wanting a phone. And their friends had maybe had phones a little bit earlier, but by the time they're kind of like getting to, so in the UK, they go to secondary school at 11. So by the time they're doing that, they're like going, well, you're gonna need me to have a phone because you're gonna want to know where I am, and you're gonna want to. And I'm like, I'll ring you when I'm on the bus on the way home. All this kind of stuff, right? Never once have my daughter ever rung me using a phone. You know, like I don't even think they know it's a phone. It's like it's a messaging device, but I don't think you actually have a conversation with it. But so there are valid reasons, aren't there, for our kids to have phones, and one of the things we actually said was, okay, you can have a phone. We're saying yes to you having a phone, but that doesn't mean that it's an unconditional yes. You know, it's not like a yes with everything that comes with that. It's a yes, but you don't get a browser on it. And that's what we did. So we were just like, you can have a phone when you're 11, but we're going to take the browser off it. So you can't go on the internet on your phone. Because if you want a phone to ring me, then, that works. So it's just worth us realising that. Sometimes I think it can feel like if I say yes to a phone, then that's it, Pandora's box, and out comes everything. And actually, it doesn't have to be like that. We can still say yes, but. And I think there are some things that can help us with this a little bit as well. As I said, the kind of tech guys, you know, the people who kind of gave us these things. One of the really interesting things, which I'm sure you've heard before, is that nearly all of them said they wouldn't let their children have phones and tablets. And you're just like, what do you know? But also, what they have started to do is they've started to actually put some effort into making life a little easier for us as parents. So now, for free, built into a phone, you've got things like screen time, where you can put a time limit on an app. Social media apps can just stop after kind of a certain time of night, or you can just say after you've used social media for 2 hours or whatever, then it stops working. You know, that's all in screen time and digital well-being, which is the Android version. You know, it's all in there, and that's for free. But if you've got money, I would also suggest you might go a little bit further. And so these are some of the kind of the tech things, because there are some app developers that actually are going, no, we really want to help you. And so they're actually putting their energy and their creativity and their innovation into creating apps that can help you. So things like Covenant Eyes, maybe you've heard of, or maybe you've heard of Bark. You know, what these things do is they monitor stuff. So using AI and different stuff like that, they'll monitor whether, you know, they're on Instagram, they're kind of looking at anything dodgy, or even typing messages that might have kind of like, you know, kind of worrying or problematic language, and then you would get a report so that, or, you know, it would ping you and tell you, and then you can have a conversation. Because this is the point. Things like this, these kind of monitoring apps, are about catalysts for conversation. You know, it's not like I'm going to put screen time on so that your phone just turns off at 10 o'clock at night and then you just hate me. You know, the idea is that we talk about why. The idea is we kind of have that kind of conversation. Also, just to say, I mentioned family tech as being something good on YouTube. Smart social is another one. You know, like how influencers are constantly telling you to, like, press the bell, then you'll get a notification, subscribe and press the bell. You know, they do that. They don't do it as much anymore, fortunately. But these are probably two where you want to do that. You know, you want to actually kind of subscribe and get notified, because they'll release a new video when there's something new to know about. So if a new app has come out, you know, and there are some apps out there that are really worrying. There just are. You know, there's one out there that looks like a calculator, but really it's a kind of vault for hiding photos and videos that don't exist in your kind of their camera roll. They exist in this app and stuff like that. So, you know, you do want to know stuff. You do want to be kept informed and kept educated. And so these are two good channels on YouTube that you can subscribe to, and they would tell you some of this stuff, okay? Let me ask you this question then. Do you have a digital family agreement? And you can vote yes or no using your phones. Do you have a digital family agreement? If you don't know what that is, then the answer is probably no. It might not be, you might not call it that, but the chances are it's a no. Okay, look at this. That's actually quite a lot of yeses. That's good. Brilliant. Oh, wow, look at that, half and half. Okay, so obviously you're very good and you're very tech smart and you've kind of had some of these kind of conversations before as church maybe and stuff like that. For those of you that are in that no bracket, let me very briefly explain what this is. I would say that a digital family agreement is where you sit down together and you agree what it is that as a family you're going to do when it comes to kind of living digitally. And this is important because it's not just about you handing down from, you know, Mount Sinai the rules about, you know, phone use. This is about you going, actually, together, we acknowledge that, like, the internet's cool and phones are cool and we all like them, but actually they can be unhelpful for all of us for different reasons. So as a mum, I can be just as addicted to social media as you can as a son. And as a dad, I can be just as distracted, you know, at the dinner table than as you can as a daughter. So that's why we're going to collectively agree no phones at the dinner table. Or we're going to collectively agree once we've had an hour on social media, our phones don't let us see social media anymore. We're going to do that together. And we might have slightly different rules for different ages and all those things, because, you know, you are adults, but there is, you know, this thing that you agree together. So here's a list of a few possible things you might want to talk about. So that might be, as I say, things like time limits on apps or app permissions. So we have a thing set up where if Ella, so she's still 17, so she's not 18 yet, so when she wants to download an app, it doesn't download from the App Store until I or Jen clicks a thing that says, yes, she can download that, right? It does annoy her a little bit sometimes because we just don't see the notification for ages. And she's like, I wanted it now. But that teaches her another thing about patience. Maybe it's like having no phones in bedrooms. That's just like, yes, that's your rule. That's probably healthy for you too. So it might be we put our phones to bed. I know some families that do that. That sounds random, but all that is like they've got a box downstairs and they go at 7 o'clock, we put our phones to bed and we don't get them out until the morning. And that means that as a family, we basically go offline in the evenings. Really interesting thing to experiment with and to try. What I would say is you want to review it every 6 months because the different ages change some of the things that are helpful or not helpful. And what you want to do is you want to agree what the implications are of breaking the agreement. So the reason that's important is together you've already said that if we find out that actually you've been doing something and you've somehow circumvented your way around this in some way, because I accept you're probably smarter than me when it comes to this stuff, but if we find out you've done that, this is what happens. You don't have a phone for a month or whatever it is. One of the reasons why that's useful is they get to kind of have that conversation with you when you're all just sitting calmly talking about it, rather than you doing a knee-jerk, that's it, you're never going to have a phone again for the rest of your life, and that's it, I'm now burying it in the garden. Because it helps you stay kind of like, appropriately kind of proportionate reactions. But also they can't say, that's not fair. I mean, they will, but you could go, but that's what we all agreed. And so that's all I suggest. I mean, do what you want. It's your kids, your life. Okay, let's talk about porn. I was expecting a woo. I'm like, come on, bring it on. I don't know what I was expecting at that point, but yeah. I get this isn't easy. This can feel a little awkward. It feels awkward even maybe now, tonight. You're like, and it's not easy with our kids, right? This is an awkward conversation with our kids. So let me ask you this question. Have you already had that conversation at all? Either a few times, regularly, or not at all? Let's see you vote. I know not all of you got teenagers, so some of you are going, well, no, because my child is 4. But that's okay. So no doesn't necessarily mean, you're failing. It might be good reasons. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, well, let me show you a stat. So the BBFC, they're the people in the UK that decide whether something should be a movie or a game, should be an 18 or a 15 or a 12 or whatever. You've probably got your own equivalent here. They did a survey with some parents, and this is what it said. 3/4 of parents felt their child would not have seen pornography online. Not my Janie, not my Johnny, not my Jeremy. We've already agreed that's the name of all of our children. Okay, so, however, of the 3/4, 53% actually had. So, just saying that we might not think this is going on, but maybe it is. So then that leads to another question. Who do you actually want to talk to your kids about porn? So this is something you have to rank in order from kind of 1 to 6 on your phones, okay? So again, apologies if you haven't got your phone with you. You didn't think you would need it tonight. I get that. But you can watch and see what others have said. And this takes a little longer to get through to submit. But you need to put an answer for all of them. So rank them in order. There we go. They're coming through now. Okay, I'm going to just talk whilst you continue to submit your answers. That's pretty standard, right? whenever we do this workshop and parents say, absolutely, I want to be the one who talks to my child about pornography. And if it has to be someone else, it would be a trusted auntie or uncle, who aren't a real auntie or uncle. They're just our friends, but we call them auntie and uncle because we're South Africans. And then you might kind of have like educators as like, yeah, maybe there's someone at school who'll go in and do a proper job. That's good. You really don't want their stupid mates talking about it. Right? Netflix, you're really a bit worried about because you watch Netflix too, and you know how dodgy some of that stuff can be. And then social media, just please no. Okay, so I get that. This is every time the same. But if you aren't actually talking to them, who is? Because it's not like a vacuum. It's not like it's just like, you know, it's getting talked about. It's getting talked about in school. It's getting talked about in the shows they're watching. People are making jokes about it. It's like, you know, being normalised. Their stupid mates are talking about it. They are. And so, you know, I don't want to freak you out, but I do want you to realise there's some urgency here that we actually take action. You know, so our desire is, I want to be the one, but what are we doing about that? And so, yeah, that might mean that it feels awkward and it might feel difficult and it might feel, you know, something that they don't even enjoy in that conversation. But we're like, do you know what? This actually matters more than whether you like me or not in this moment. This matters more than whether I feel awkward or not. And so that's why I want to kind of give you some ways in which you can talk about it. Do you know what? I think we're there. I think we'll go on to this. Okay, so let me give you some tips then. I got a picture of an old lady there because I feel like this slide feels like it's teaching your grandma to suck eggs, okay? Do you even have that expression? Thank goodness. That would be a very random thing to have said. Teaching your grandma to suck eggs. No, okay. So this is probably a bit of a reminder, a bit of a refresher. This isn't going to be new news, but it's worth us remembering, particularly when we think about talking about pornography. So, first thing I'd say is start 2 years earlier than you think you need to. Whatever age you've got in your head, that's when that conversation starts, try if you can, if it's not too late, to think about doing it earlier. I'd say start small. What I mean is don't go home tonight and like sit down with the 13-year-old at the kitchen table and go, right, we're talking about porn, get ready. You know, you can just have little, like, bite-sized conversations all the time, at different times. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be intense. It doesn't even necessarily have to be now. But you're looking for those opportunities to talk, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you're kind of going, okay, I'm going to talk about this for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to walk away. And I'm just going to kind of almost do a mic drop and just let them go, oh my goodness, did my mum really just say that? And let them kind of figure that and maybe come back and ask, why did you just say that? But, you know, they are all helpful things to try. Definitely focus on the why. You know, if we're just saying, like, porn's bad, even if you can get to the point of explaining what porn is and why you think it's unhelpful, but if we just say it's bad, you know, how many of you remember being a teenager and told by your parents that something wasn't a good idea, or it was bad or unhelpful or whatever, or, you know, he stroke she, stay clear of them, and all those things, and you just went, you've just given me a brilliant reason to do what you've just told me not to do, because that's a thing about being a teenager. So it's really important that we help them understand that there is a why behind this. It's not just a rule. And so that might be about our family this is who we are. This is the stuff that we believe is important, and if faith is part of that conversation, even if you think your kids are like maybe in a different place in their faith journey, that you can still go, okay, look, I get the fact that maybe, you might not share the same ideas that I have right now about God. That's okay. But this is still who we are as a family. And there are things that we believe as a family that shape who we are as a family that are about, human dignity and valuing others and stuff like that I know you think are important. So it isn't like, well, the Bible says don't look at a person lustfully with your eyes or, chop your hand off or whatever. That might not be relevant for them if they're like, well, I don't really care what the Bible says at the moment, Dad, because I'm 15 and that's where I am right now. But you can talk about the fact that, I hope that you as a family, we are teaching you to be a person who respects other people and respects women. And the problem with porn is it is devaluing and objectifying. It turns people into objects. And so actually the reason why I'm saying stay clear of this is because I don't want it to shape how you see people. Because that's not who we are. That's not who you are. It's a different type of conversation, but it's a really important one to just be trying to bring in and talk about. What I would say is do everything you can to avoid shame in these kind of conversations, because as I said, particularly if maybe there's stuff going on that you don't know about, they really are watching you. And it's so important that our body language, is just right in this. And we as a family have had to journey some of that, and lots of friends who've got teenagers have had to journey some of that, where, a kid has come and said, actually, I've struggled in some of this stuff. I've been watching these things on Netflix, or I've been going on these websites. And as a parent, what we want to do is scream. But, we have to just say, oh, thank you so much for telling me that. I know that must have been the most, you've probably been putting this conversation off for so long. Thank you that you've had the courage to just tell me, come here, let me just give you a hug, because before I even say anything to you, I just want you to know that I love you. And what you've done or not done isn't going to change that. So let me just give you a hug, and then let's try and talk about how we can help you. And I know everything else inside is going, but if we can remove shame, because we know this, don't we? Because some of us know this in our own lives too. When there has been shame, what has happened is it's not made us lean into freedom and trying to get ourselves some help. When there's shame, it makes us go into the shadows even more and secrecy even more, right? So anything we can do to try and avoid shame, and we're not always going to get it right. And we are going to react, and we are going to maybe say some things that we regret, and we are going to be a bit like that. That is going to happen. Something I keep telling my girls a lot is, I am a parent, but I'm also a person. And so that means my mood is not always perfect, and my tone doesn't always come across the way I want it to. And so I might sound a little bit like at you about something, and I will do my best to say sorry when that happens. But I am human. But, we're not going to get it right, is all I'm saying. But anything we can do to try. Another side of this would be think shoulder to shoulder. So again, the best conversations I've had with my girls over the years have been when we've been driving somewhere. Normally, I'm taking them to school or something like that. And they can look out the window and I can look out the window, and they don't have to, or going for a walk, or, I used to say, washing the dishes, but no one does that anymore. But, whatever it is that, means that you are kind of side by side, that helps with some of the awkwardness and stuff like that. I also add a little bit of a kind of, that's me driving, by the way. That's what driving looks like in England. So, I was listening to the radio and there was this thing on the radio about, in high schools, there's just been loads of incidents of kids being asked to send nudes by friends in their school or people they know in their school. Are you hearing about that happening in your school? Have any of your friends ever been asked to send a nude? And do you know what? They absolutely know what I'm doing. It's not like they're going, oh, you're interested in my friends, are you? They know I'm just trying to make this slightly easier, but it helps. So even if you're kind of like, you use a news item or you use something to kind of have a slightly more general conversation where you can still talk about stuff, I think that can be helpful as well. One of the other things I'm just going to quickly point out, because I think this can be helpful as well, is we've talked a lot about our kids being digital natives and growing up with phones, and that's all they've ever known. One of the things, and we've talked about they don't use them as phones, they message each other or leave voice notes on. You guys are obsessed with WhatsApp and leaving voice notes on WhatsApp. That's very Gen Z of you all. Well done, South Africa. And some of you are going, Gen Z, what's Gen Z? Don't you mean Gen Z? No, I don't. I mean Gen Z. I'm English, not American. So you might be going, oh, okay, so messaging for me, right, is fairly functional. So if I send a message to someone, it's like, oh, I'll be here then, or okay, or yes, this is an arrangement that we're making. I'm not sharing my deepest personal stuff on text. I'm feeling really sad today. Maybe I do to my wife, actually, but to most people, I'm not kind of expressing emotion or anything like that. Maybe a little crying emoji just doesn't quite cut it. So I tend to save that for verbally talking. That's just not true for teenagers. It's not diluted communication. It's actually preferable. And so let's just leverage that. Now, I get that as parents we want to teach our kids to be able to actually have a verbal conversation. But at the same time, on this topic, maybe what we do is we send them a WhatsApp that says, oh, I've just found this video. Tell me what you think about it. And so then they watch it, and then they WhatsApp you back, even though you're sitting in the lounge, and they're sitting in the lounge. They WhatsApp you back and go, oh, yeah, that's quite interesting, I suppose. Oh, yeah, they talked about that at school, or whatever. And you start having a bit of a conversation about something. That might be easier for them than you having that kind of like, driving in the car conversation. I would just say any conversation is good. And so if this helps you both with some of the awkwardness, maybe that's worth thinking about. Okay, so I'm going to spend 10 minutes now going really quickly through a kind of framework that you could use when you actually want to talk about pornography. Okay, and what I'm going to give you is basically like 3 things that you can talk about. You don't necessarily have to talk about them all at the same time. You might just take one of them and talk about it, and that's cool. And then that should leave us with about 10 minutes to do Q&A at the end, and then you'll be going home, and it'll all be over, and you would have survived. Okay, so I'm going to skip through this video because I don't think we need those for today, but I am going to do this. So when we're doing schools in the UK, we're going to do something different here in South Africa, but when we're doing schools in the UK, we ask young people to think about a definition of pornography. Now, the Collins English Dictionary defines pornography as writings, pictures, and films that have been designed to stimulate sexual excitement. Okay, and that's helpful because you've got a what and a why in that definition. It's important that young people understand that porn isn't just, those porn sites. It might be fan fiction that they're reading online. It might be actually something they're listening to on Spotify. It might be, manga or anime cartoons. It might be a sex scene in a Netflix show, but it's not a porn thing, but it is a sex scene. It might be any of those writings, pictures, films designed to stimulate sexual excitement. The why is important as well. So that means actually, your kids can be in a museum with their grandma, and they walk into a room and there's a load of naked statues from the Greek era, all marble, all beautiful and all naked. Fortunately for them and their grandma, they are not looking at porn with their grandma, right? Even though there's like nudity there. Because it wasn't designed to stimulate sexual excitement, right? That's not, it's art, it's history, it's a whole load of other things. We don't know the motivation of the sculptor, admittedly, 2,000 years ago, but that's not why it's there. Whereas they can be watching a pop video and there's no nudity in it and no sex in it, but there's a load of stuff going on that is kind of the director just trying to use sex to sell. And actually that probably fits this definition of pornography more closely, right? So we just got to be helpful in that we kind of think about that because, again, you're intelligent people and you're like going, okay, so you saying, art is, you've got to work this stuff out for yourself. But a definition that we have is that porn is the junk food of healthy relationships, okay? And that is a kebab. Do you have kebabs here? Like that, spinning around, sort of? Okay. That would be my, Okay. That's a doner kebab in the UK. That's what that's called. Okay. Now, I think you guys know this guy because of 60/60, right? So he's a good old Essex boy like me. And he is a chef who loves food, right? You know that, and there he is, loving it. You know that Jamie Oliver loves food if you've ever watched him cook a recipe. What you might not know is that for 20 plus years, he's been campaigning against junk food, right? Now, the reason I mention this is because, again, this is really important about our posture in our conversations. What we don't want our kids to think is that we're anti-sex, right? In fact, it's the opposite of that. You see, Jamie Oliver's thing is it's like the world of food is so good, why settle for a crummy turkey Twizzler or a KFC or whatever? There's so much more. Don't settle for that. And it's unhealthy. And it's But almost like the starting point is there's just loads that's brilliant. Don't just put up with that. And I think when it comes to us talking about this stuff, we want to say, look, I actually think sex and relationships and love and commitment, they're brilliant. There's nothing better than when you fancy someone for the first time when you're 15 years old and you, blimey, they fancy me too. That's unbelievable. I never thought that would happen. That's an amazing feeling. Enjoy it. I don't want you to not enjoy that. But what I want you to understand is that porn is going to not give you a good understanding of what relationships and love and commitment and sex could be. And then you can give them a quote from a pope. And do you know what? If you haven't got a quote from a pope, you will do now. Okay? This is what the pope said. He said, the problem with porn is not that it shows too much, it's that it doesn't show enough. And he isn't like a dodgy pope, but what he meant by that was that it's not that the problem isn't that you just see too much sex or too much nakedness or whatever. The problem is you don't see enough of love and commitment and human dignity and intimacy. You just see sex. That's the problem with porn. It's not that it's too much, it's that actually it's not enough. And so that's the posture I think we want to have with our teenagers. We actually want to talk about this in a way that is positive, if we can, rather than negative. That's Jamie Oliver going, this is amazing, as well as going, yeah, but this is unhealthy. So that just avoid that because there's this. That's what we want to get to, okay? So there are 3 questions that porn companies and junk food companies don't want us to think about. Okay, so if I walk into the kebab shop, the poor guy working behind the counter, he just wants me to order a doner kebab and walk out. He doesn't want me thinking, is this good for me? Is this good for my health? Because I'm 51 and I shouldn't be eating a kebab ever, but definitely not 10 o'clock at night when I'm standing in his kebab shop, right? It's just not the healthy option. He doesn't want me thinking about my health. He doesn't want me thinking, what's in this? Because there is probably some lamb, but I'm not sure what the other stuff is. And all I'm saying is there's not as many cats in our neighbourhood as there used to be. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying, right? And he doesn't want us thinking, how was it made, okay? In other words, what's the carbon footprint of this doner kebab? Where has it been shipped from? How were the animals treated before they became a kebab? You know, he doesn't... I mean, it's true. He doesn't want me thinking, he just wants me consuming, right? And the porn world is exactly the same. It doesn't want you, me, or our kids to critique or question. It just wants us to consume because it's only interested in profit and money. Okay? So that's why these are 3 helpful questions. Now, these are all in the pack as questions, and there's some videos that are attached to each question that you could sit and watch and talk through, or send us a link on WhatsApp, or it can just educate you and you can try and have a conversation, whatever, okay? But basically, they're highlighting kind of 3 areas, and I'm not going to talk about them. I'm going to literally just zip through because it's all in the pack, okay? And because Shell is looking at me going, like that. No, she hasn't actually, but there we go. Okay, so is it good for me? So this is the health question. Basically, there's a lot of science, there's a lot of research now that helping us understand that porn is damaging to our health. One of the things that neuroscientists are beginning to understand is that digital porn is a super stimuli to the brain. It can create escalation and tolerance and dependence in the same way that substance drugs can, or maybe online gambling can, which is people seem to be getting their heads around that as an addiction in a way maybe they're not with porn yet. But just the science is there, the research is there, there's more and more of it. If you want to find out a little bit more about some of that science, 2 places to go. Yourbrainonporn.com is kind of like a good place for all the peer-reviewed reports if you're that kind of person and like to go deep. Fight the New Drug is much more aimed at teenagers, and that's where you might find some of the videos that you might want to send as a link. But they kind of talk about some of this stuff. Next question then is what's in it. This is really about what are the messages, what are the ideas that are being presented by porn that might actually affect how you see yourself and how you see other people and what you think is normal about relationships. So, you know, we've got stats from South Africa of, teenagers basically saying some really disturbing things about what they want to do in real life when it comes sexually because of what they've seen online, because that shaped what they think is normal. You know, in the UK, there was a report that came out by the sort of Children's Commissioner, the government's kind of appointed person to kind of think about children in the country, about pornography last year. One of the things it says in that report is she had numbers of teachers reporting, like school teachers reporting, kids saying things like, when I have sex with my girlfriend, do I have to strangle them? Right, for example. Or even like a girl saying, I had my first kiss with this boy that I liked and he started to strangle me. Now, why is that coming up? Because basically choking is like a massive genre within pornography. And so teenagers who don't realise that this isn't normal, this isn't healthy, because actually they're learning about sex from a distorted, corrupted place, are thinking, oh, is that what we're supposed to do? So when we talk about that, but also the body shapes, all sorts of stuff in it, what's in it is the conversation. And to be asking the questions, how does it make you feel about yourself? How does it make you feel about others? When you see all those women with, big boobs and big bums, or all those guys with big muscles and big other things, how does that make you feel? Let's talk about that, because actually maybe this thing that you kind of, your mates say is fun, does it feel fun when you just don't really like how you look afterwards? So having those kind of conversations, I think, is part of what that means to talk about what's in it. I'm skipping through. How was it made? This is really asking young people to think about the people on the other side of the screen. It's interesting this, I don't know how this translates over here, but there's more and more teenagers, more and more young people who are choosing to be vegetarians and vegans, for example, because of the environmental crisis. They're like, do you know what, meat, it's a big part of the climate crisis, and so I'm going to go vegetarian. Not because I don't like eating a burger, but because I believe in something that is more important to me. Or maybe for other reasons like animal welfare or whatever. They're making a choice. In other words, they are saying no to something they like, a burger or bacon sandwich, because they want to say a bigger yes to something they believe in, right? And young people are actually often quite idealistic in a good way like that, aren't they? Let's encourage that. Yeah, you want to do something that feels significant. Yes, well done. But can we use that passion for justice, for human rights, whatever, that young people carry often, and say, okay, well, what we understand about the porn industry is that most of the stuff that people would scroll through on a free website, a user-generated YouTube-esque porn site, is full of non-consensual videos. In fact, the world's biggest site like that a couple of years ago removed 10 million videos overnight because of some of the lawsuits that were starting to be brought against them about consent. So 10 million of the videos before that, they had no way of knowing how consenting the people involved were. We know trafficking organisations rescuing people out of sex trafficking and sex work against their will, saying, yeah, we were filmed and it was uploaded onto a porn site because traffickers will make more money from the views than they will from having a client come to a brothel. So having that kind of conversation with an older teen, for example, takes this beyond what do you like and much more about, well, what do you want to say yes to? And are you willing to say no to even something you like because you want to say a bigger yes to something you believe in? Like justice or human dignity or human rights or whatever, the 100% of the 100 most viewed videos, like 88%, that might be slightly wrong, you might know the right number, 88% of those videos show violence or aggression. And 97% of that 88%, that violence and aggression was towards women. So if we're kind of wanting, our men and girls, our boys and girls, to kind of like have respect to women, to be anti-misogyny, to be anti kind of gender-based violence, then we need to have the conversations about the stuff that is online, free as porn. And so it's having those kind of conversations. They're almost easier to talk about in some ways than is porn a good or a bad thing? Do you want to, they're not like, it's like a no-brainer. Okay, so I just want to mention this website because it's got something interesting. Then we're going to do questions. Brainheartworld.org. It's basically 3 documentaries that are about 30 minutes each. That tackle those kind of 3 questions we've looked at just now. So one looks at how does porn affect the brain, one, how does it affect your relationships and the way that you view relationships, and one, what's happening in the wider world and some of those justice issues we've mentioned. They get a bit heavier as they go, as you can imagine. So if you've got a younger teen, you might go, well, we're just going to watch Brain. And that's cool, right? So I'd watch them first. But you might want to go, actually, this is something we could sit and watch together. Or I will definitely send a link to this. And then I will say, I'd love you to watch this in the next 2 weeks. And then I'd love us to have a conversation about what you thought it was about. Because this is important stuff. And so just take a look at it. It's free. You can just watch it, each episode, and decide. But they, I think, will help you have the conversation that you need to have. We said it at the beginning, and I want to just say it again. We talk about this stuff, and it can just feel overwhelming, but I truly believe it's not hopeless. In fact, I know it's not, because I'm a parent, and I've had conversations with my girls, and sometimes, it's not been easy, and sometimes those conversations have been hard for all of us. but we've had the conversations. And we can talk about it because we had the conversations. And I don't know what lies ahead for them, but my hope would be, if they ever struggle with this as adults, we could still have the conversations, that this becomes something that is just like, we talk about this. And so I do know there's hope because of my own experiences as a parent, but also because of the other parents I know who are embracing this. And I sense the fact that you are here tonight is you're already winning, because you're already choosing to be the kind of person that's going to try and do this stuff. I'm not saying all the people who didn't come, failing, but what I am saying is you guys, the fact you're even here means that actually you're already ahead. You're already doing the right things. And so there is hope that as we do, even little things, every little thing, I think, makes a massive impact on how our young people are going to navigate this stuff. And so, well done. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being brave enough to turn up, and all that stuff. And even if it's starting small, you really can do this. And, you'll get it wrong sometimes. Very, very quickly, we've got 5 minutes left. Let's have a look at some of the questions. If you haven't written a question yet, then you can still enter them now. But we've got like 5 minutes, and some of these you've been doing as we've been going, and so maybe what's happened is I've then answered your question as I've been waffling, and so that's cool. So the first one, I'm going to just show you this. I think I can do that. Hang on, let's do that. What do you see? Yeah, that was it. Bad. I guess you typed it in the wrong place. Right? Otherwise, that's sad. Just great review. I think it's like, I'm sure there was an option. Are you feeling overwhelmed? I think it might have been that show. Okay. At what age do they start understanding the conversation pointers? I mean, it's worth saying probably everything that I've talked about today, you're going to parent the kid who's in front of you, right? And even my 2 girls were really different on some of this stuff. And so, again, that's really annoying because you might be like, just tell me what age. But I think the reality is you will know your kids and you will kind of know what will work, what won't work, when, all that stuff. And so I wouldn't want to kind of say there's an age where they're going to get this. Watch things, read things, understand things, take a few risks, try something out, see how they respond to it, and kind of, parent the child who's in front of you, not like, what everyone else's kid is doing, or even what your other kids are like, would be my advice on that. Is there a cross-platform app that a family can use to manage restrict content within the household? Yeah, so some of those paid-for ones I mentioned have some of that kind of facility. So Covenant Eyes, I know, does, and you can have different devices all on the same account. You obviously, as adults, can even choose to do that, and a lot of them do. We don't have Bark in the UK, but I know you have it here, and I know that lots of people talk highly of Bark as another option. So there are definitely 2 that I know people who use both for those platforms, but they are subscription based. And so again, that's not always possible for everyone. Not everyone can afford to do that. But it might be, maybe I don't do something else so that I can have that. That's an important thing to think about. I know some people don't. Literally, you're counting every rand and you're just not sure how you're getting through the week. Then I get that. But if you have got a little bit extra, but maybe you could just stop spending on one thing to enable that, it might be worth it, would be what I would say. So Covenant Eyes is the one that we've used, but all those on that list, and that's all in the parent pack, and you can take a look and see what they offer. They do different things. I'm sorry. Is this just a good comment rather than a statement? It seems like we're treating phones like a motorbike that you need to learn how to ride at a young age at low speed until they're older. But I see phones more like alcohol.
That was the
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your talk. It's been really helpful.
Yeah.
Just it seems like there's a lot of well, obviously every kid has a phone, so do the best with that.
Yeah.
But all the stats on every measurable aspect is really, really bad.
Yeah.
And it's really obvious to me that kids cannot handle the addiction. So even if it was no fault at all, just the addiction of stroke. And so I love that you mentioned rather than a smartphone, and we still have phones for sale in South Africa, and someone have that. Is there, I really feel so we see it as a phone, as like a bicycle, and you put training wheels, and but I see more like alcohol. It should, it's actually, it's old enough
Yeah.
to manage the days. And so
Yeah.
is there a moving trend towards,
Yeah.
actually, let's not get on their phone at all?
So let me comment because yes, but it needs you all to be involved. So I'm seeing this in the UK. So there's a grassroots movement that's coming up from parents that's called smartphone-free childhood. And it's kind of, I don't know if it's made it over here, but it's kind of like parents making agreement with each other and then kind of lobbying schools and all sorts of stuff here. Because the hard bit is, right, for your kids, I mean, I had mates who weren't allowed to have a TV, right, because their parents didn't let them have TV, because they thought it was evil or whatever. And that was just really hard for those kids. That was the reality. It was just really hard for them. I'm not saying it was a bad decision by the parents, but it was really hard for the kids. And so I understand lots of parents going, in principle, yes, I would love my child to not have a phone, but I don't want them to be the kid in school who doesn't have a phone. So the way you deal with that is collectively, as parents, you say, actually together we agree. We're not going to let them have phones until 15 or 16. So the smartphone-free childhood is the campaign is until they're 16. Don't have a smartphone until they're 16. And so getting on board with things like that, particularly when you guys are already a community, that is really doable, and parents are doing it. And they're having the courage to do it. And so I would definitely encourage you to look at that. I once sat in a parents' workshop, and it was a multi-session thing. So I'd done one, and then someone else did something afterwards, and it was in a really expensive private school. And the parent and all the kids were boarders, and all the parents came for the day for these kind of extra things. And somebody kind of said pretty much what you said, right? And then another parent went, well, if I had known that you would have done that, we wouldn't have done that. We just thought that everybody else was going to do it, so we had to do it. And it was like in the room, in the moment, the parents were going, if only we just said to each other, let's just agree not to do this. And they were a really close-knit community because they were all part of this small school and all that. So it is doable. And I think you're right. In many ways, it is more like alcohol. But what I'm trying to do is go, sometimes it's kind of like, I'm imagining that most of you, it's already happened. The horse has already bolted in that sense. And so I'm just sort of going, well, if it's already the case that you've got a phone in the hand, what can you do about that? But if you are still got young enough ones that you haven't got there yet, that is a real serious consideration, and maybe you're talking to your parents who've got kids in the same grade and going, what do we want to do about this in 2 years' time? Do we all agree not to wait? And if you did all agree, then your kid doesn't feel like the weird one. And together, you're kind of trying to do something that is transformative, actually. So look it up if you haven't kind of looked in more detail about smartphone-free childhood, because I think that is a really interesting movement with some good resources, and it helps you have conversations with other parents without it looking like you're like a weird religious person or something as well, which is another factor, right, that you're probably thinking about. These other parents, they don't want to look weird, I don't want to look weird. So this is a kind of, universal campaign that you could perhaps all get around. I'm really aware that we've run out of time. There was a couple more questions. There was one about how do we help kids not idolize internet individuals and people like Andrew Tate and stuff. That is a great question and quite a complicated answer, I think. And then there's one about masturbation, which I guess I'm not going to start at 9:33, but you can come and ask me, afterwards. I'll stick around. So if you ask those two questions, you're like, actually, I would like an answer. I'm happily answer them, but I don't want to keep everybody behind. So you can just come and talk to me about that individually. So I'm going to just say thank you. Thank you for coming. Thanks for partaking in everything and just being really, communicative. And I can't say that one either. I hope it's been helpful. And let's keep the conversations going with each other too.
Ian, can we just say thank you to you? I think you've done a fabulous job tonight. You really have given us some markers in the landscape. So I feel they're just markers, and you've given us lots more to keep on talking and to keep on investigating. And I think that really is part of the joy of being part of a community, that as parents, we can keep talking with each other. We can go and we can start reading the pack, and let's keep talking. We need wisdom. We need God's wisdom. We need God to lead us. We need a shepherding, and we need one another's help in that. So we'll definitely send you through a link to everybody who came. If you didn't sign up or you didn't put your email address when you signed up on Quicket, Sally at the back with the red tag over there, who's smiling, please get hold of her. She'll just take your details so that we can send the details through to you later. So can I just pray? Can I just commit this to the Lord? Oh, my Lord, I just thank you for this evening. Thank you, Lord, for the gift you've given us of Ian's knowledge, of his wisdom, of his experience. And Lord, we just look to you as our ultimate Father, as our ultimate shepherd, and we parent and shepherd our children underneath your loving care. And we look to you to lead us, to guide us as we shepherd our children, that they would grow up to be young men and women who love you with their whole heart and make good choices in following you all their days. Amen. Thank you, everybody.